Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give everyone another moment to dial in, and we will kick off. Perfect. Well, it's 1 past the hour. We've got about 50 people dialed in, and the number keeps ticking up, so we will get started. So again, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We will be sharing the latest travel and digital marketing trends and tactics to achieve direct booking domination. I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Tina Markowitz, our VP of Global Digital Strategy. She leads our e-commerce strategic planning for Cendyn's hotel customers. Her team provides clients with holistic and innovative digital marketing campaigns that deliver business results. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will be receiving a link to the recording by tomorrow morning. Another note is that all attendees are on mute, so please use the module screen on your sidebar if you'd like to submit any questions to today's presenters. Your questions and comments will only be seen by today's presenters, so as I mentioned, we'll reserve some time at the end to run through those. And then just a note as well, for more learning opportunities, please be sure to check out the Resources Hub at cendyn.com. We have a plethora of ebooks, webinars, infographics, and blogs. So do keep your eyes out for that as well. And then just a little bit of structure for today's webinar. Here's today's agenda. So first, Tina will be running through consumer journey trends. So everything from inspiration, planning, and booking phases. And then she will move on to travel trends and ways to capitalize them. And then lastly, we'll wrap everything up with some top of mind media trends and 2024 sort of marketing strategy recommendations. And then we will close with a Q&A session. So with that, I will hand it over to Tina to get us started.
Thank you, Grace. All right, so exciting stuff here. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff that continues to evolve. I think there's been so many changes. I hate to say post-COVID, but I'll say it, but changes in digital behavior and things like that. And we see that, of course, within the consumer journey. So going to the next slide, I think the most important thing for all of us to be aware of is digital is complex. Shouldn't be really a surprise to anyone when you think about your day-to-day life and all of the different touch points involved in making different decisions, planning things, and booking things. And travel is no different than anything else. And so in a world that is increasingly fragmented, how can we think about navigating this and ensuring that our marketing dollars are making really doing the hard work for us? So going into the next slide, let's think a little bit about what inspires people to travel. And a lot of this really hasn't changed that much. We know that there have always been so many touch points and different things that inspire people to travel. But something that is different and does continue to increase is the influence of social media as inspiration. We see 77% of people are influenced by social media. And something that we see a lot with clients is that, of course, social is important, but maybe it doesn't get quite the attention from a creative and a content standpoint as maybe it deserves, knowing that 77% of people are influenced by social. So people are looking around, they're shopping, but ensuring that there is great content on social is going to be really important when you think about all of the different ways that people are influenced and are inspired to start taking a trip. So going into the next, how can you think about this from a strategic standpoint? So think about an upper funnel strategy, right? When we have that upper funnel strategy, we know that it has to include social. Something that, when we're looking at sort of influences within the consumer journey is that a lot of people in this inspiration phase haven't figured out where they want to go. They know they want to travel. Maybe they want to travel someplace warm, or they want to travel someplace cold. Not me, I would really only travel someplace warm. But maybe they haven't picked the actual island, the city that they want to go to. And so when you're thinking about creating content for your upper funnel strategy, think about the destination rather than just the hotel itself. I know sometimes it's hard for hoteliers to take a step outside of the rooms or the amenities, or making sure that the front of the property is front and center in some of these advertising creatives. But think about the destination, because in this phase of the booking journey, you're really trying to capture someone's attention as they're scrolling through their feeds, right? Someone a long time ago told me that the way to think about it is, what can you show someone to stop the thumb, right? You're using your thumbs to scroll through, but what do you have to do to get a thumb stop? And so I think about that a lot when we think about creative strategy for this upper funnel, these upper funnel efforts. And one other thing is, you want to really combine those with clear call to actions, right? If we're going to be on social, what are we asking people to do? Is it learning more? You don't necessarily want to push them to book during this phase, but how can you encourage education? So just a couple of things to think about here in this inspiration phase. Planning. So in an average booking length of 71 days, only 33 days approximately are spent in inspiration, and then 38 are spent in this planning phase. And so really important to focus on. And we see here, the data shows us that search is still king when it comes to planning. So as much as we can, talk about sort of different sexy media ways to capture people's attention, you got to get the foundations right, because people are using search to plan. And so what does that mean from a tactic standpoint, right? How can you think about employing different ways to ensure you're there on search? So not only is brand important, and I will reiterate that you want to make sure that brand is fully funded, you also want to make sure that you have non-brand search. And so that is consideration, right? This consideration phase. You want to make sure that maybe things like destination, different amenities, different activities, those things are funded, and that you're really thinking about maintaining that hold on some of the key terms and phrases that are important to you and to the business, right? Google has actually released a lot of new features that will help improve broad match performance. I could talk ad nauseum about AI and AI's impact on advertising, specifically when it comes to generative search, but that would be a different webinar. We don't have time today. But just know that there are a lot of features within Google to improve how you think about broad match, right? Adding different modifiers They're adding different brand control features so that you can control how you're spending against some of these terms, because people are searching in so many different ways that you want to make sure that you're showing up. And then this is about driving direct bookings, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention OTAs, because they are an important part of the planning phase, right? People are going to the OTAs to check competitive rates, to look at different hotels, to look at destinations. And so you have to make sure that those OTAs reflect all of the same visuals, up-to-date information, and things like that, so that when people are planning, they have that information available. And so now planning is over, people are ready to book, right? They found your hotel, they know it's the best one, and they're ready to go. And fortunately, what the data is showing us, especially coming out of COVID, is that booking direct is favored as long as we make it easy. So as marketers, our job here is to capitalize on the fact that people would prefer to book direct with us. And so how can we do that? Right? What are a couple of those strategies? Got to make sure your website works and is optimized. I can't, that is the most important part of this, right? You need to reduce friction for the consumers. Like I said, make it easy for them to book with you. Important for you to maintain rate parity, right? If someone is searching and they see a rate on Meta, they get to the website and, ooh, it's $50 more. That's not a great experience for them, right? So those things are important to keep in mind. This, of course, making sure that you're capturing that lower funnel intent, so that when someone does search directly for you, that you're present and that you're capturing that. You're not going to lose it to an OTA who is, of course, going to serve those ads, but making sure that you're capturing people when they are ready to book, bringing them to a fully optimized website, and showing them the rates that they need. So all of these things combined, really different strategies for thinking about activating across the consumer journey, which is extremely fragmented, and really making sure that you stand out and then you're delivering the booking. Hey, Grace.
Thank you, Tina, for those wonderful insights. It was really interesting to sort of hear everything across each phase. We've actually had our first question come through, so I thought before we dive into the next portion of today's presentation, I'd serve it up while it's top of mind. So someone has asked around sort of budgetary, it's a budgetary question. So how would you recommend sort of splitting a digital media budget across inspiration, planning, and booking?
So good question. One we get a lot. And while my answer really is, it depends, I know that's probably not going to cut it for this group. So I'll give sort of two different answers, because it does technically depend on what you're trying to do. If this is a new property, if you have a new property, if you're coming out of renovations, if you're rebranding, you want your upper funnel efforts to be disproportionately higher. You really need to stand out in that a cluttered environment. And so I would typically say you should look at 40–50% of your budget in upper funnel, and then sort of split the rest 25–25 mid funnel, lower funnel. That's the sort of exception to the rule, right? Every day, going about your business, probably say 30–35% in lower funnel, because you really need to make sure that you're there. Like I said, you're capturing that search intent. Then look at, another 35%, maybe 40%, depending on the market and the strength of the destination market. If that's really competitive, you want to make sure that that is mid-funnel, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can do what we call sort of qualified prospecting. So those are things that you want to really make sure are covered. And then the rest of the dollars, please don't, I'm not going to do the math now, that's embarrassing. But the rest of the dollars want to go into upper funnel. And we'll talk later about some newer ways that you can think about adding some upper funnel efforts to your media strategy.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tina. Didn't want to make you do any math on the spot, so we appreciate you pulling out those percentages. I will now move on to the next slide.
Okay. All right. So the next couple of slides go through some of the key trends, and we'll spend a little bit less time here because I want to make sure I can get to some of those new and splashy media trends. But let's start with mobile. So really not a new trend, but I do think that we are seeing some new data where more and more bookings are being done in mobile. And so something that really stands out to me is looking at 47% in 2019 of bookings that are done on mobile to over 60% now in 2023, right? We're seeing over 70% of travelers. They're using their smartphones, they're booking different holidays, and more than that, they're happening really quickly after a search. So what does that mean for us, right? What are some of the ways that we can capitalize on this? We know that things, I will say again, need to be optimized, not only for, on the website, but they need to be optimized for mobile, right? The last thing someone wants is to be on their smartphone and to have the website not load, to have that experience and sort of navigating the site be extremely unwieldy, right? So you have to make sure that the experience is seamless across devices. When someone searches on laptop, that needs to be considered, and then they need to follow that experience on mobile. There really shouldn't be a difference. And when we think about sort of the length of time that happens between search to booking, your retargeting is extremely important, right? So knowing that you have a small window from search to book, how can you start to retarget with appropriate ads based on that activity? So just a few things to think about there. Leisure, one of my least favorite words that have sort of buzzwords that have developed, but we're going to use it. Really the merging of business and pleasure. So we're seeing airlines report more and more of the revenue coming from people who are combining business and pleasure travel, and 89% of people are adding vacation time to their business trips. Now this really covers, runs the gamut from digital nomads who are really taking advantage of flexible work to go out and see the world, to just someone who's adding on a weekend to catch up with old friends because they happen to be in a city during the week for some business meetings. And so really, really important, because as we're seeing some fluctuations in business travel, business leisure is really taking off, and something that hoteliers really have to be aware of when it comes to thinking about their promotional strategies. So how can you do that? So when people are planning, when either they are looking looking to book or things like that, not only do you need to be thinking about your on-site business facilities, but what else can you offer? So instead of really thinking separately about these two types of travelers, understand that they are potentially the same traveler, right? How can you encourage a business traveler to stay more with extended stay offers? Something else that I think about is how can you, if you want to really take the next step, ensure that your CRM is equipped for a work email and a personal email, because someone had probably booked for business, but then they want to stay with their family, and they'll switch to their personal email. So a little bit more on the technical side of things, but something that I often think about, when it comes to taking advantage of this trend in travel. And then, of course, you want to make sure that everyone has access to the right communication tools, and that should be something that features itself in your advertising. Sustainable tourism, really important when it comes to thinking about how to get in touch and to engage with younger audiences, right? We know that this matters, that sustainable tourism, matters, that travelers will pay more for hotels that align with their values. And so when it comes to sustainable tourism, not everybody can really advertise this, but if you are able to, what does that look like? And so this is something when we, go back to earlier in the inspiration phase, really taking advantage of highlighting this on social, promoting that sustainability, anything around ecotourism, and then follow through. I think the worst version of this is advertising it but not delivering. And so making sure that those practices are reiterated on property, that they're part of the experience. I had a friend who stayed at a hotel in Charleston, and he mentioned multiple times how amazing the water was on all of the floors. That just having the bottled water, it was in glass jars. When you got out of the elevator, it was a little thing, but he kept saying it was the best water he's ever tasted. But that on property, sustainability, it really does hit home with people. So make sure that you are bringing it through from advertising to practice. And then last is transformational travel. And I think we've all been aware that wellness travel, that silent retreats, that yoga retreats are things that have really started to gain prominence in the past few years as people look for ways of really not indulging, but taking care of themselves and self-care. I think another part of this is, these learning trips, right? How can transformational travel, we need to think about in terms of maybe knowledge as well. And so I think that opens up the aperture for ways that this can be incorporated. Even if you're not a amazing spa with all of these yoga, yoga classes, but what can you do instead? And so a couple ways, right, is, similar to when we think about sustainable travel, how can you explore partnerships with local gyms or spas or different wellness providers if you don't have these amenities on site, right? So that's an easy way to think about expanding your offerings beyond just what you have. And then something else is think about knowledge and how can you add seminars for guests looking to learn, right? Whether it's any local tours or different local spots, how can you encourage that learning? So just another way to think about transformational travel. Now I know I am almost at time. I was joking to Grace earlier that I was a little worried about having enough to talk about, and of course now I'm running out of time. So we can sort of run through these last few. I'm not going to talk about the basics. I want to reiterate that having a really great foundation is key. So I won't talk about any of that, but instead want to talk about some newer trends that you may want to think about incorporating into your upper funnel efforts. So starting with connected TV. For those of you that don't know, connected TV is any TV set that's connected to the internet. And it's basically how most of us watch TV these days. And so in the next slide, just sort of understanding, the impact there and why this matters is similar to the way that TV in the olden days would drive, consideration and then purchase. We see 46% of people search for something after they've seen it on connected TV, and 39% end up buying, right? Really, really amazing stats on the power of incorporating this into some of your upper funnel efforts. And it's just an amazing vehicle for hotels and hospitality in general to showcase not only the property, the experience of travel, which is so powerful. And so why now? It is the most watched form of TV, and ad-supported is more popular than ad-free. So there's tons of places for you to advertise, and it's, you know, not necessarily cost prohibitive. There's lots of ways that you can test into it and that you can make it, you know, an ongoing part of your ad efforts, or something that you lean into for short periods of time when you need the business, either ahead of high season or, you know, maybe for specific holidays, things like that. Digital out of home. So I come from retail and e-commerce, where this was a bigger part of sort of the media mix, but I do think it's really interesting for urban properties that are really looking to make a bit of a splash in some high traffic areas. So not really for everyone, but definitely something to consider, you know, again, for cities, for hotels in bigger cities, or potentially in airports, right, is another place that we see a lot of value for certain hotels. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Performance Max, but since I'm sure most of you are aware, just a really good thing to add on if you're looking to test into new features, right? This is an easy, low risk entry point for taking advantage of a lot of great Google features that incorporate AI, machine learning, things like that, and just being able to serve across a wide variety of inventory. So I won't spend any time here since we're running out of it. And I did want to get to the last note here, which is thinking about influencer collaboration. So I started with social, I'm going to end with social, but not just thinking about influencers as a way of organic, you know, partnerships, but leveraging influencer content and these collabs for enhancing your advertising. So, you know, making sure that when you are negotiating these contracts, you're thinking about, you know, writing in the ability to use the content for paid ads, right? Ensuring that you are setting it up so that it's showing as sponsored, so that, you know, it's showing as this paid partnership, so that you get the social credibility, social proof for working with the different influencers that you have picked. We do tend to see really strong performance, improved performance, because the content is real and authentic. And then, of course, from a paid standpoint, you're not only getting your own audience or the audience you're targeting, but you're also expanding to their audiences, right? And I have yet to negotiate an influencer contract where the influencer is adverse to having the content paid and boosted beyond just their organic reach. And so it's just thinking about rights management when you're negotiating these contracts. Again, happy to provide advice. I have done this for a long time, but just think about making sure that you're adding in those caveats to the contracts as you're writing them. So I know I ran through the last couple of things pretty quickly, but I think I ended right on time. So yes, thank you guys so much for joining, and hopefully these strategies help you dominate the direct booking.
Perfect. Thank you, Tina. I really appreciate that. And thank you for keeping to time throughout. We have had another question come through. Obviously, you highlighted the importance of sort of incorporating social media strategy at, you know, throughout the consumer journey. Now, when speaking of channels, are there any that you would say are more prominent than others in terms of where hotel marketeers should focus their spend?
Within different social channels?
Yeah.
I mean, I will always say that with a limited budget, you get the most bang for your buck from going on to Meta, Facebook and Instagram. I struggle with calling it Meta. But you really do. And you can adjust budgets to serve more on Instagram. You know, we tend to see that perform a little bit better again in that upper funnel space. I would say that the next one is probably TikTok, with the growth that we're seeing there and some of the conversion rates, especially, you know, looking globally in different areas. TikTok is probably the one where, you know, testing different content partnerships would be the next one. And then my other fave is probably Pinterest, because you get really long-term benefits out of the content that you create, and you really tend to see long tail value. So you'll see things drive conversions 9 to 12 months later. So those would probably be my 3 in order of priority.
Fantastic. I think that's the last question we have for today, and we are nearly at time. So I just wanted to extend a big thank you, to all of you who have dialed in today, but also to our digital media and strategy guru, Tina. Just a kind reminder that everyone will be receiving a recording to today's session by email, likely tomorrow morning before you come online. And if you would like any more information about Cendyn's digital marketing services, please do contact us at info@cendyn.com. And with that, we will close today's session. So thank you very much, Tina, and thank you to all who dialed in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.